Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson. Delighted and honored to have back with us today Walid Shoebat. He's a former PLO member and Muslim Brotherhood activist, but he's written some books, and they're very interested. And if you haven't picked them up, let me encourage you to grab a couple of them. For God or for Tyranny, and God's War on Terror, and Why We Want to Kill You, and Why I Left Jihad are just a couple of the titles you may want to check out. By the way, his website is Shoebat, that's SHOEBAT.com, if you want to communicate with him today. And we have him on Skype. Walid, nice to see you, my friend. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. You know, you must really be watching what's happening in the news like the rest of us with incredible emotions as to what's happening. And of course, yesterday, the beheading of another American journalist. It just doesn't seem like this administration gets it.
Well, the problem with administration is it's liberal. The problem with the beheading as well is that Stolov was also liberal. You know, unfortunately, he had thought that he can go to Syria, go to Egypt. In fact, in my blog, I talk about some of his writings in which he went to Egypt, and his buddy Ahmed told him, watch out, because Muslim fundamentalists will hack you. They have access. And he says, I didn't listen to Ahmed. I found the Muslim Brotherhood to be absolutely the opposite of what my friend told me. This is not true. This is false media. This is false information. You know, I show some of this writing. And so there's this naivete in the media and in the government that wants to pussyfoot with Islamic fundamentalists. And they think that they can go in and have a true peace dialogue with the situation. And what happened with Stolov and what happened with Foley as well, you know, it was the ultimate disaster. And so I warn Americans out there, don't mess around with Muslim fundamentalists. They could kill you. It is a fact. This is not a fish. It's a cobra.
Wow. You know, they changed their names. Of course, now we're dealing with ISIS, but they changed their name, I guess, to create some kind of new interest or whatever that is. But how big is this threat to us in America now, Walid, from your perspective?
It's a major threat because it is much bigger than Al-Qaeda. It is much more sophisticated than Al-Qaeda. ISIS is designing to use plagues. I know they talk about the bubonic plague. A Tunisian was caught with his computer. In fact, last night I was reviewing the fatwa that was given to groups like ISIS. It is a very intricate fatwa that talks about the permission in Islam to kill Americans in mass, strictly Americans, regardless to how many Muslims could be killed, even that there's Muslims living amongst Americans, that is justifiable. They talk about, let's say, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, which is the first Khalifa in Islam, who says, do not cut a tree, do not harm. You know, it was more of a positive thing during jihad. But then they go on and say, well, Ash-Shafi'i says you can cut trees, you can destroy infrastructure. They talk about Maliki, they talk about all the different four major sects of Sunni Islam that they approved mass killing, and they gave so many examples from the scholarlies of the past in Islam. So Americans don't understand when they hear one side of the story from a Muslim apologist that would say, look what Islam teaches. They don't understand the underlayings of other teachers in Islam that use so many events in history to justify the mass murder and the mass killing. ISIS is interested in a grand finale. Al-Qaeda, of course, was interested in a grand finale in 9/11. Now, ISIS is interested in a different kind of grand finale, and that is to use weapons of mass destruction. In fact, on YouTube, the array, hundreds of YouTube training videos are allowed by YouTube. I sent an APB to YouTube, to the world, to the FBI, to show the intricate, detailed techniques of how Islamists can create RDX, the sophisticated explosives, rocket launching, how you can use from cow manure and how from beginning to end, from A to Z, how you can manufacture from the cow manure. You don't even have to get the fertilizer ready. You can make it ready yourself to create highly sophisticated explosives. Mm-hmm. It is amazing. 81 series of videos from the beginning of creating rockets. They're talking about creating a Hamasistan on the front line here but they're looking for recruitment in this country. And of course, we hear from our own authorities, even in Texas, they talked about infiltration through the border. So it looks like it is inevitable that we're going to have the kind of terrorism that America has never seen. America's not used to this kind of beheading the sea with Foley and Stolov. Wait till to see what happens in the front line here, if and when the Al-Qaeda or even ISIS sympathizers begin to be active here. So it's not ISIS trained from there. You can have home front cells here who are very sympathetic, and there is plenty of these, and the ability and the capability to create weapons of mass destruction is on YouTube.
All right. Let's talk about the Christian execution just for a moment. We're seeing it, but we don't seem to be that disturbed about it. I just don't understand that. But there is no negotiation. You either convert completely to Islam or you're dead. Is that basically it, right?
Absolutely. Even if you're a Muslim, yesterday I watched a beheading. I watch beheadings every day. It makes me sick. I just don't post them anymore because people are so desensitized to the thing. A guy was just delivering military uniform. He was a delivery guy, and he was a Muslim, and he was begging for dear life and declaring the Shahadatan in Islam. It made no difference. There was a video of a Christian who converted to Islam. It made no difference because in their view, you still have to pay the penance, and that is by killing you, slitting your throat. So it don't make any difference what you do. You're going to die. End of story. Amen. That's it.
Wow. All right. So could they be wiped out? I mean, if we had an administration that took these acts as acts of war, could they be wiped out?
Yes, but the problem with the administration, the problem really is with the American psyche and how they think. Mm-hmm. The wisdom says that, no matter who we aid in the Middle East, from the Muslim sects, it doesn't matter. From Reagan's era all the way to Obama's. From Reagan's era, we aided the Mujahideen to fight the communists in Russia that gave birth to the Taliban. In Obama's era, all the way down, we have the disintegration of secular governments, and the reversal of Sykes-Picot is exactly what ISIS wants. And we are seeing currently the results. Right now, we're aiding the Peshmerga, and they're really taking the weapons from the Christians. Christians are not allowed to carry weapons in the Kurdish regions to defend themselves, and the Peshmerga is taking their weapons. To us, the Peshmerga are heroes, so we're aiding and abetting the Peshmerga. Tomorrow they'll be our enemy. Today we're aiding the Turks. They're already our enemy. And so, we look at a success in Amirli. Amirli is a village that the Shia Iraqis took over. Now, if you look at what the statements are coming out from the front there, they're talking about jihad. They are talking about very much fundamentalist Islam in the same fashion as you would have the Muslim Brotherhood. So you look at the general giving the statement, he's talking about thank you to a Sistani. A Sistani, Iraqi Sistani, was born in Iran, and he's very much allied with Iran. And so right now, who's calling the shots in Iraq? It is not Al-Maliki. It is a Sistani who is allied with Iran. Iran is an enemy, of course. Iran, is a state sponsor of terrorism. And so here we are either hoping the Iranians would defeat ISIS or the Turks would intervene. So we're sending Chuck Hagel to Turkey, not realizing Turkey is the father of the bastard child we call ISIS, because we show videos of training in Gaziantep, in 3 different locations in Turkey, is training centers of ISIS. And of course, the Turks have this arrangement with ISIS in which they tell ISIS, you have our hostages, don't harm the hostages. And we will tell the Americans, look, we can't do anything about ISIS, we have hostages. Well, that's a game they play. If it is true that ISIS really hates Turkey, why did ISIS blow up every single tomb in the region except the tomb of Suleiman Shah, the father of the Ottomans? Well, it's because they have a deal with Turkey. And so we need to understand this. The only way to clean up the mess is for the United States to do it. Aerial bombardments, as well as arming the Christians. Why don't they arm the Christians in Iraq to fight? Why don't they arm the Christians in Syria to fight? Why are they arming the Muslims?
Amazing. And do you think if Do you think Kurdistan is in danger? I mean, if we don't completely support them, could they be annihilated with this?
Well, yes. I mean, it is very dangerous. Kurdistan could be annihilated by ISIS. Mm-hmm. But again, it shouldn't be only the Peshmerga that's doing it. It should be the Christians of Iraq, the Assyrians, the Chaldeans, the Chaldeans there. They're willing to fight. They're willing to carry arms too. So we are basically aiding one part of the equations, the Muslim world, right, but we're not aiding the Christian world. That's why we're on Rescue Christians. The only ultimate solution for the Christians now is to get out of Iraq. So we're de-Christianizing the entire region by aiding Muslims to fight against the ISIS.
All right, let me take a quick break here, Walid, and we'll come back. We've got a lot to talk about. This is just mind-boggling, and yet you watching the news like everybody else, it appears that our current president or administration does not have a plan to deal with this. And I'm sure that was good news to ISIS, but it certainly sent a message to the world that we're just a non-player in this, and it's very dangerous, and I want to get your comments on that. We'll be right back with Walid Shoebat. And by the way, his website is Shoebat, SHOEBAT.com. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back, and our special guest today is our good friend Walid Shoebat, and you may want to check out his website and correspond with him, and of course his blog, and then you can go there to Shoebat, SHOEBAT.com. Walid, before I go much further, you're a former member of the PLO, Muslim Brotherhood. What happened to you? When did you see the light? Tell us your testimony in short term.
I mean, what people want to hear most of the time, how I secularly changed my mind, but it doesn't work that way. Islam is a religion. Being an Islamist is part of a religious movement. And the only way to get out of this Islamism is another theology. I found Christianity. And that's been my crime, really. People expect, or Americans expect, that, Islamists could just change their mind because they see the light of America. It's not how it works. People believe in God. There is, religion is the issue. Religion is the adhesive that decides in the Middle East, even in the Middle West. Right. People keep forgetting this. In Turkey today, it's religion. Davutoglu is talking about religion. Right. So the issue is a struggle between good and evil. Jesus Christ, who says, look, you don't have to die for God to go to heaven. I already died for you to go to heaven. So to me, that's a much better deal. And so, there is something to be said about Christianity. Yeah. And to combat terrorism is to really talk about Christianity, in my view.
That's wonderful. Were you looking to change? What happened? I mean, when you...
Actually, I wasn't. I was looking to refute the Bible because my wife, she said to me, if the Bible has been corrupted and it's as evil as you say, show me the problems in the Bible. So I really never studied the Bible to show her the problems. I spent $10, bought a Bible with a blue cover, a King James, New King James, opened it up and began to read. And as I began to read, I just couldn't put it down. I spent an entire year to find the problems in the Bible. What I found was the problems with myself. I found that Israel is not what I perceived it to be. I found that, no, the Jews didn't own all the banks. They don't own and run all the media. It's the opposite. So I had all these conspiracy theories in my mind. Now I deal with conspiracy theories on the American side. We're loaded with conspiracy theories. Wow. We're loaded with slander. We're loaded with all kinds of things that I deal with every day in my blog. Wow. And it's to no end. People buy into lies. They don't ask themselves before they say anything slanderous, what is the evidence of what I'm about to say?
That is beautifully said, and it also speaks of the power of the Bible, the power of God's Word, doesn't it?
Absolutely. in Amos chapter 9, verse 15, God says, I will plant them in their land, and no longer shall they be pulled up. One half of a verse that talks about the state of Israel. In other words, it's going to be established, and it's impossible to uproot it. Now, is this half a verse a historic reference? It can't be. They were uprooted by the Romans. It's talking about the time that we live in now. And it was impossible for me as a Palestinian to uproot Israel. It's impossible. We tried in 67, we tried in 48, we tried in 73 in Yom Kippur War, or Harb Ramadan as we called it. We failed miserably. So I began to ask myself the question, either the author of the Bible was a perfect guesser, or there's a God. So I chose the latter than the first. There is a God. I came from somewhere. I'm not buying the theory of evolution that I came from slime. The evolutionists should get their own dirt to make man. It's impossible. And so I look at life much simpler than these complicated, sophists that I see every day on television. I can't stand it. I look at life much simply. They want to kill us. In the past, I wanted to kill you. And then I began to look at you and say, is this the person I wanted to kill? Is this the Jew I wanted to kill? This is a poor individual. Why? What for? Let him live. Let the Jews live. Let the Muslims live. Let everybody live. Let us discuss theology, and let us debate theology, and let us each make his own mind in freedom and liberty.
Wow, that is so beautifully said. All right, I want to come back to, and I want to get very specific. Why do you think President Obama is silent on this issue? Why do you think he is not coming out viciously angry of the beheading of an American journalist?
Well, to answer the question, I will ask, why would Obama more prefer help the Yazidis? Now, I'm not against helping the Yazidis. Why not help the Christians? How many Christians have Obama helped to bring into the United States? They're fleeing all over the globe, except the United States is kind of closing its doors. Why is Obama so adamant against the Bible? If you go to YouTube and you put Obama Bible, it's nothing but criticism. And if you plug in Obama Quran, it's nothing but compliments. I look at Obama really culturally still have not really divorced his past and his Islamic culture, Islamic even thinking. I don't believe Obama is a Christian at all. What's he doing for the Christians in Iraq and in Syria? Absolutely nothing. So it's either Obama is this liberal mentality, and if Obama is Muslim, Muslims are liberal as well. Keith Ellison is not conservative. Keith Ellison swore on the Quran. He is very liberal. Islam is not conservative. Islam believes in al-ishtirakiyya al-islamiyya, Islamic socialism. They don't believe that life begins at the moment of conception. So the issue of abortion is a different issue than the way we view it as Christians. The view on environmentalism is very similar to the liberals with Islam. They have what is called himaz. Al Gore loves Islam. It is not naivete that the liberals like Obama or Al Gore, Hillary Clinton, that are so anti-Christian and so pro-Islam, it's because there is much agreement between the two sides. Of course, until the Islamists comes to chop their head off, that's when they'll call 911. Is there a gun? We need a gun. And that's how it is usually with the liberals. That's how it was with Foley. That's how it was with Stoloff, who went messing around thinking that you can deal with Islamists, that they're really peace-loving religion and everything else. And the end was a disaster. And this is what I plead for everybody. You don't teach your children and say, listen, son, drugs is bad. Beware of drugs. Oh, marijuana, that's okay. You say all drugs is bad, including marijuana. So it doesn't matter if it's a Muslim brotherhood who's a fundamentalist who doesn't behead you, or ISIS. Boy, that's a PCP. That's a real heavy drug. It doesn't matter. You stay away from all drugs in the same essence. You stay away from all fundamentalist Muslims. They are trouble. The Americans need to understand, once they get a victory, either political or military victory, these people kick in high gear. Look what happened in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood. They began to kick in high gear. Right. Egypt went into chaos until the military intervened. And the same thing is going on in Iraq. We think Al-Qaeda was bad. Now we have ISIS. It is much worse than Al-Qaeda. What will it be tomorrow? It will be the killing of all the Christians in the Middle East. Will that wake us up then when every Christian is killed in the Middle East? God forbid. We need to wake up now And America needs to do something now. Do it the right way.
All right.
Help the Christians fight, and they need to do it themselves on the ground and clean this mess. Remember, never reverse Sykes-Picot. Long live Sykes-Picot. That's what we need.
Oh, well said. Why do you think the UN and other countries are so silent on this? This is a world problem. And just human rights violations being very basic. Why isn't the UN screaming on this?
The UN is not about human rights. If the UN was about human rights, why would they have elected some countries to represent in the UN for security and all that stuff, and they're terrorist states? So it's the united nothing, really. The UN does some good things when they send food and supplies. This is all a facade of doing something. But the fear is not just from the UN only. It's from the European Union. It's from the United States. The fear is to really address Islamic fundamentalism and to uproot the problem from its source and tell the truth about this problem, this epidemic that is going on. And nobody wants to address the issues. The issue is Islam. You want to reform Islam, so you get somebody with three-piece suit to talk about this is not true Islam and this is the true Islam. And so you get Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who has a handful of followers, yet you don't find scholarly Muslims to say this is really Islam and we need to reform it. It's not going to happen. There is no reformation of Islam. Show me the reformers. Who are they? What's their name? What is their theology? What is their manuals? Where are the libraries that talk about reformed Islam or democratic Islam? The Middle East has always been in decay because of Islam. Islam is the problem. Mm-hmm. And as long as we keep pussyfooting around this issue, we're never going to solve the problem.
Walid, and I'm going to run out of time, and thank you for your transparency here. I think the Christian community, the faith community in America is standing back not knowing what to do. We are now in the crosshairs of this organization, the ISIS and other fundamentalists. Scripture says, pray for your enemy, turn the other cheek. I think we're caught. We just don't know what to do. We want to fight, but is that biblically correct? How are you wrestling this?
Well, I look at Matthew 25 when Jesus says, for I was hungry, you gave me food. I was naked, you clothed me. I was in prison, you visited me. To feed, to protect, to defend takes action. It takes amount of work. What Jesus was saying is that if you don't do this kind of work, you really never had faith in me. Depart to the left, you evildoers, doers of iniquity. We have sold the American Christian a bill of easy believism. We gave them 4 spiritual law in the booklet, and we forgot to tell the Christian, when you see the apartment building burning, you got to risk your life to save that old lady burning in that building. And that's the problem. We forgot the essence of what the reason Christ came. We think that Christ came only to save us. Christ came to destroy the works of the devil. That was the purpose of Christ's coming. That's what it says in the book of John. So it's very clear. Christ came to destroy the works of the devil. And if we are to be Christ-like, we also have to work to destroy the works of the devil. And if Jesus says no love is like when a man dies for his friend, that's the greatest love. Well, how does a man die for his friends? He commits suicide, or he defends his friends, or he defends his wife, or defends his homeland, or he defends his fellow Christian, or he defends the Jews. To be Christ-like and to die for your friends has to take an element of defense. The Bible does talk about defense. We isolate Old from New Testament. We think that the whole Old Testament is done away with in every way, when the New Testament talks very well about the valiancy of Abraham, of Jephthah in warfare. So, we allow Israel to fight. We as Christians say, Israel, they're holy, they can fight. It's in the Holy Bible that they can fight, but the Christians can't fight. That's hypocritical. If Israel has a right to fight, Christianity also has a right to fight.
Wow. That was prophetic. Thank you, my friend. You're in our prayers. We value greatly the opportunity to talk to you and look forward to doing it many more times in the future. The best way for people to correspond with you is through your website?
Shoebat.com, SHOEBAT.com, just as you spell the word shoe and the word bat, one word, .com.
All right, thanks. Good to see you. God bless you, my friend.
You bet. Take care.
Okay, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Welcome back. Well, there's been some pretty good conversation lately. Is church attracting and holding people? Why it seems that more and more people just don't go to church anymore? Well, I think that you'll find this to be a fascinating discussion. Our own Steve Johnson had a chance to talk to Thom Schultz. He's the CEO of Group Publishing and the author of Why Nobody Wants to Go to Church Anymore. Let's join their conversation.
You know, I really like the title of your book, but it's also a little disconcerting, I'd have to say. You know, the fact that why nobody wants to go to church anymore, I think that's been a problem that has been in the back of our mind, maybe a part of a lot of discussions. But I want to ask you first, before we find out what you found out, what was your concern that caused you to write this book? Did you notice this trend in your own church, perhaps?
Not only in my own church, but we've been working professionally resourcing churches over the past 40 years. And we've noticed a number of things over those decades that have led us to some real concern. There's something happening right now that's different than what's happened in the past 100 years in the church in America.
Okay, you know, I think of the 70s and the 80s and kind of the youth movement bringing up all sorts of praise and worship type churches. So we have seen kind of growth that way, but we are seeing some problems. Tell us what you have found in your research about people who are leaving the church.
There are some startling things happening today. In fact, 80% of churches today are either stuck or in decline. And we're losing people across the board, all demographics, all denominations. And it's especially striking in the younger generations. The millennial generation is leaving us in record numbers.
Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't Christians. They're what, just not going to church necessarily every week?
Correct. Although there is some softening in terms of people identifying themselves as Christian or with any religion, what's sometimes called the nones, the N-O-N-E-S, people who choose no religious affiliation, that group in America is growing, and rather quickly.
All right, so what were some of the questions that you posed to, I suppose, people who were going to church, who weren't going to church, and maybe people in between, if you can be that way?
Well, we found 4 different recurring themes that came up with people across the country, both in our own research and in other people's research. We conducted interviews with people across the country, and 4 things came up as to why they were staying away from church. First one is they say, I feel judged, that church people and the church in general judges me, myself, my background, my past, my lifestyle, and that's one of the things that's keeping them away. The second thing that we heard over and over, and this one surprised us a bit because we hadn't heard this before. This one was that at church, you're just lecturing me. It's a one-way communication setup where you're not interested in what I think. You're not interested in my thoughts or my questions. And they are interested no more in that kind of approach. People today are coming from an interactive society, probably driven by the internet, where they want to be involved in the process. They want to go back and forth. They want their questions addressed. So church as we know it simply is not set up for that in their point of view. The third thing that we heard is that, well, this one's probably familiar to us, that church and church people are simply a bunch of hypocrites. But what's new about that is they're not simply saying that, well, you say one thing and do another. What they're reflecting upon is that you're setting yourself up as a know-it-all, as the person with all the answers, and we know it's not that simple. They want to be engaged with people who are seeing that they are part of the journey, part of a spiritual journey, and that we're all in this together is what they're looking for. And finally, the fourth thing that we heard from people is that, you know what, your God seems irrelevant, or at least when I have attached myself to a church experience, a worship service or whatever, I don't really sense the presence of God there. I can find God elsewhere in greater degree than I do in what you do at church.
Well, you know, some of the things that you've mentioned there, if you just take the structure of how churches kind of designed the meetings, doesn't matter what theological perspective you come from, the format is largely, I think, the same. You know, you normally have a preacher who is preaching out there. Do you think this could really change a lot in that style structure to be able to be relevant to millennials, for example?
Yeah, that's what we're asking people to do, is to reevaluate the methods that we're using in the church. We're not asking to reevaluate the message. The message is the same and will always be the same. But the methods that people, human beings, have created over the past hundreds of years are called into question now. So, for instance, we're looking at coming back upon those 4 things that people say are driving them away from church, and we're suggesting 4 things that we can do differently that will connect better with today's culture.
So, have you come up with those 4 proposals?
Yeah. When people say, I feel judged, we say, let's create an environment of radical hospitality. And by that, we mean that we're ready to accept, just as Jesus did, we're ready to accept the person just as they are without judging them. Now, that doesn't mean that we're endorsing everything that they do, or all of their values. We believe that we can accept without necessarily endorse, and that's what people are looking for. We call that radical hospitality. And when they say, well, I don't want to be lectured, it's a one-way communication structure, we say, let's engage in fearless conversation, where it's a two-way street. Even Sunday morning in worship, where we allow for people to engage with one another, spend a few minutes talking with one another about the subject at hand, and allow questions. Now, I know sometimes that makes pastors and preachers freak out, because they say, well, what happens if somebody asks me a question I don't know the answer to? Well, that's where the fearless part of the conversation comes in, where we're not afraid to tackle any question or any subject that people come up with. And it's okay to say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that question, but together we're going to find some ways through this. The third thing that people say is that the church is just a bunch of hypocrites. But we say the antidote to that is genuine humility, where we have an authenticity that we project with people, where they get the idea that, you know what, we're all in this together. No one of us is closer to God, or no one of us has all the answers. We're all in this together, and we're going to work through it together. When they sense that, that's attractive to people. And then finally, when people say your God is irrelevant, or I'm not finding God there, we advocate that we use something that we call divine anticipation. That we're looking for God to show up, and we create our experiences around that. We give space for God to show up. You know, I think sometimes in the church, we've become so accustomed to putting out what we're putting out that we're ready to move on to more advanced theological stuff. And where the culture is today is they're way back at first base, where they just want to know that God is real. And the more that we can bring up the stories, even from among the people, from among their peers, where they can hear stories of God active today, not just yesterday, not just 2,000 years ago when the scriptures were written, but today, where they can see that God is actually alive, active, and among us today. That's attractive to people.
You know, I think most of the items that you mentioned there, I think a lot of churches would strive to have. They may not have it, but that idea of saying, hey, we're not perfect. In fact, we're kind of the spiritual hospital, so that's why we're here. As well as a pastor, if he projects himself or herself as infallible, then that's going to be a problem right there, too. It almost, I think, when you were talking about this, I was thinking back, remember talk shows when you'd watch on TV, they'd be a one-way conversation until Phil Donahue started running up and down the aisles with microphones asking questions. Now, I only want to bring the analogy to that and a church service the same, but I think what you're talking about is having this ability to be able to have an ongoing conversation, which I almost think the first generation Christians after Christ left and left the apostles in charge, that's probably the kind of environment they had, because I'm sure they had a lot of questions, met in smaller groups, and I'm sure there was a dialogue going back and forth. So in a way, do you see this almost as reinventing ourselves back to what may have been the very first type of church services?
Yeah, in many ways, exactly that. We're looking back to how the church began, and we can find some real secrets there, I think, that we need to return to. Because what we're finding ourselves with today, I think, is not too dissimilar from what Jesus found when he came and began his ministry here, and he found that the church, as we know it back then, the temple, was distracted by all sorts of other things that weren't directed at helping people develop a close and growing relationship with God. They were all bound up in rules and traditions that Jesus was highly critical of. He came in part to help shake that up and help people realize that it's time to return to what we're really about. I think we're in the same place today.
All right. We only have a few minutes left. I want to ask, have you come across opposition to some of these ideas that you say how we could reinvent ourselves? Are some people saying, you know, this isn't what I really feel comfortable doing? Maybe some pastors who've had that thought?
Sure have. When dealing with the church in particular, we're dealing with a behemoth of a machine that is cloaked and bound by tradition. We've been doing the same thing for so long that our methodology in many people's minds has become holy itself. And when you challenge that, it makes people very uncomfortable. And when we talk about the reasons that people say they're staying away from church, one of the knee-jerk reactions that some church leaders have is wanting to attack the unchurched, saying, well, those reasons are bogus. They're just excuses. And they want to spend their time attacking people for coming up with those reasons on why they're staying away. And that's a waste of time from our point of view. To attack the customer, as it were, will never help us solve the problem and help make the gospel more approachable for people. Not changing the message, but changing the method on how we do that.
You know, I'm thinking you may be opening up a whole nother classroom activity for would-be pastors on how to perform your church service out of the box, so to speak, because of all of this. I appreciate you being with us. Thom Schultz, author of Why Nobody Wants to Go to Church Anymore. I appreciate you kind of tackling this, and I think a lot of people are going to be fascinated by what you've come up with. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, fascinating. All right, coming up next, we're going to be talking to Jim Gilchrist, and he has an interesting take on, well, Jerry Brown, governor of California, said to all of the folks south of the border, come on in, you're welcome in California. Really? Well, we'll talk to Jim about that coming up next.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Well, we are delighted to welcome back to Focus Today Jim Gilchrist. He is the founder and president of the Minuteman Project, and interested in a variety of things, and his background is very fascinating, to say the least. If I gave you his resume, it would take up all our time together. But let me give you his website, minutemanproject.com, and that's a good place to correspond with him. Jim, good to see you again. How you doing, my friend?
Very good, Perry. Thank you for having me on your program.
Yeah, you bet. First of all, before we get too far into this, tell our audience again what the Minuteman Project's all about.
I conceived the Minuteman Project back in August 1st, 2004, for the sole purpose of bringing national attention to an issue I thought was critical to our domestic tranquility and our heralded stature as a nation of laws, and that was the illegal immigration crisis. My organization is a multi-ethnic immigration law enforcement advocacy group. Essentially, we encourage people to operate within the rule of law to support enforcement of the law. A very avid defender of First Amendment rights for everyone, regardless of what the debate is or what your opinion is, and certainly a passionate supporter of law enforcement.
All right. Well, thank you for your work. And again, minutemanproject.com if you want to correspond with Jim. Well, Jim, as I mentioned earlier, Jerry Brown says, hey, come on in. What's he doing to California?
I think Jerry Brown, like so many of our political governors, I refer to them sometimes in humor as the gods of governance. They've essentially lost touch with what our identity as a country is, what the concept of a nation governed by laws as opposed to mob rule is. And Governor Brown is just one of many state governors who have lost touch, essentially have lost touch with the overwhelming majority of American citizens. Doesn't mean he's a bad person. Doesn't mean Obama's a bad person, but I used to be a member of their Democratic Party. As I saw what the Democratic Party was doing, in my opinion, I left and became a Republican because I think they're more in tune and in touch with the realistic expectations of the electorate.
All right. This move to me, Jim, seems to be highly political. I think he's just gearing up to run for president at the cost of destroying the state that supposedly he's trying to govern. If he says, come on in, no matter who you are, illegal, legal, otherwise, what's that going to do to California?
Perry, this has been going on for 54 years. We have not had a leader, a national leader, or a Congress that has encouraged the enforcement of our immigration laws and respect for our immigration policy since Dwight Eisenhower, 1952 to 1960. It's gotten now to where it's a crisis, it's a calamity. It's not just a couple of thousand illegal aliens coming into the United States without permission. It's several million per year now. I've concluded that the Democratic Party is primarily responsible for this calamity, followed by about half of the Republican Party. Our two major parties no longer seem to represent us. They don't represent me. They don't represent you. They've left us in the status of Americans without a country. Meanwhile, they are pandering to the millions of illegal aliens in a fight over a prospective voting bloc. According to my immigration legal counsel, advice from him is that the Democratic Party will amnesty 5 million with the stroke of a pen. That will allow the other 26 million, because there are over 30 million in the country right now, in my opinion. It will allow the other 26 million to come out of the shadows and demand their amnesty as well. And they will be entitled to it because of precedents set by our president and our Congress. The consequences that to citizenship, and with that comes voting rights. And this is what this open border philosophy has been all about, Perry. It's been about a fight over who is going to gain absolute control over all of our bureaucracies. I know it sounds like this might be way out there, and I'm wearing a foil hat, but I'm not the first one to have this theory. I'm probably the first one to bring it forward aggressively, so that the public can be aware.
Well, we are all expecting the president to do some kind of an immigration amnesty executive order within the next week or so before Congress reconvenes. This would fit very well with what Jerry Brown's doing. And yet you go down to Texas and you get into Arizona, you got a couple of Republican governors trying to hold it at bay. Where is the line, Jim, from your perspective of the federal government versus the state government on the border states?
I think the state governments should have the right to enforce federal immigration laws. For some reason, the only reason I can conclude is what I just explained to you about it's a fight not to represent the two major parties over who's going to get a superlative voting bloc that's going to determine who will control the United States for the next 100 years, which party. The states want to comply with federal legislation. They want the immigration laws enforced. They are tired of being invaded and being used as the scapegoats, as if somehow they're xenophobic, they're racist, they hate people, they hate immigrants. And none of that is true. They love America. That is very true. And they want to preserve the United States as a nation governed by laws. We have a federal government that's certainly been led in a wayward direction by its presidents, current and past. And Congresses, current and past, that for some reason do not feel that representing the public or this individual states is paramount anymore. That for some reason the central government should control everyone, control our lives, control what's going to be next. Sharia law, if we have an Islamic president who's going to give an executive order that we will all now obey Sharia law, who knows? But I'm as confounded as the electorate about this fiasco, that this transformation of a government that no one can recognize anymore and no one feels comfortable with anymore. As a matter of fact, many of us are beginning not only to fear our government, but despise it. I don't mean in a hateful way, but in a very, very mistrustful way.
Very well said. All right. Again, it's minutemanproject.com if you want to correspond with Jim, minutemanproject.com. Jim, before we run out of time, give me a little bit of a update on Operation Normandy, that project.
Yes, Operation Normandy was conceived out of in the memory of President Dwight Eisenhower, who was a major orchestrator of the original Operation Normandy in 1944. That was the beginning of the end of the Axis powers, killing a lot of people, millions of people, and engaging in global warfare. This Operation Normandy under the Minuteman Project, I feel, will be the beginning of the end of the lawlessness. We're not against immigration. We are for an immigration policy that will guarantee the United States will continue to be an economic power, global economic power, and in addition, will continue to be a civilized society for another 200 or 300 years. And I'm asking everybody to join me on the border at any time over the next 10 months up until May 30 of next year to show bring their grievance forward with the federal government by appearing on that border and engaging in border observation and reporting activities.
All right. And then get more information there at your website?
Yes, visit me at minutemanproject.com. Click on the icon, Operation Normandy, to jump in and register your support for what we're doing. Thank you.
All right. One last question before I let you go. What's been the reaction to Governor Brown's statement among the citizens of California about, say, hey, come on in, you're welcome here?
Very negative. And it's almost like a cancer, in my opinion, my words. The mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, followed in step with Governor Brown, inviting as many illegal aliens into his city as whoever wants to come. And this is insane. This is absurd. It's like living in a home with no windows and no doors and let strangers come in and have their way with your family members, with your stuff, with your property. It's not right. And Americans are starting to get this, and we are all bewildered. We don't understand what our country is doing to us. It's not our country anymore.
Well, fascinating. Very well said. Thank you, Jim. Good to see you again. Keep up the good work. And it's minutemanproject.com is his website if you want to correspond with him. And let's stay in touch, okay?
Thank you, Perry. Anytime.
All right. See you later. All right. Again, that's minutemanproject.com. That's his website. We'll see you next time on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, theDove.us.